So if I asked you what was the worst shipwreck in history, I think we all pretty much say the same thing, right? For the most part, most of us. We would all say the Titanic, right? But is that true? And have we been programmed to think that? Why is that? Why we're always given that shipwreck? I'm guilty too. I'll be honest with you. That was the first shipwreck I ever seen in the 3rd grade. And it just stuck with me for some reason. And throughout the years, I don't know what it is, man, but it's just one that has stuck with me ever since I saw that video that was shown to us in the 3rd grade, bro. But this video here is no one talks about the shipwreck worse than the Titanic. Let's see what they talking.
Is there a famous incident more legendary than the sinking of the Titanic? All of us learn about it. All of us are obsessed with it. But what if I were to tell you it's not even the worst ship that's ever been found? These are 12 shipwrecks worse than the Titanic. Number 12. The Essex. Around 200 years ago, the whaling ship known as the Essex was navigating the southern Pacific Ocean. The crew sought sperm whales, prized for their blubber and oil. On November 20th, 1820, Captain George Pollard took to the whaleboats to pursue a pod of whales while the remainder of the crew stayed aboard the Essex for repairs. Suddenly, they spotted a colossal sperm whale, approximately 85 feet long, surfacing just beneath the ship. The enormous creature charged at the Essex, colliding with the vessel and causing chaos among the crew. The whale struck again, this time smashing into the bow and disappearing beneath the waves. As water flooded into the ship, the crew scrambled to lower the remaining whaleboats, hastily loading them with navigational tools, bread, and water before the Essex sank into the depths. All 20 crew members were alive, but now found themselves in the vast Pacific Ocean, hundreds of miles from the nearest land. Pollard wished to head toward the Marquesas Islands, the closest land marked on their maps. But others were fearful, convinced that the islands were inhabited by cannibals. Instead, they decided to drift south, hoping to flag down another whaling ship. Days turned into months, and their supplies dwindled to nothing. Desperate for sustenance, they turned to their shipmates for food. After approximately 3 months adrift, 2 of the whaleboats were finally spotted by passing vessels. Ultimately, only 8 of the original 20 crew members survived this harrowing ordeal at sea.
Whoa, he can't just breeze past that what he said. He said they turned to their shipmates for food. Anybody else interpret that as they ate them jokers, bro? Like, can you imagine sitting there and you're starving and then everybody just start looking at you all of a sudden? Oh, I ain't going down without a fight, bro. No,
While it may not have been the deadliest shipwreck in history, the Essex remains one of the grisliest maritime tragedies ever recorded. Number 11. USS Indianapolis. In July 1945, near the conclusion of World War II, the USS Indianapolis, a heavy cruiser, embarked on a mission to the Pacific waters where the Essex had once sunk. This 610-foot vessel was carrying 1,195 sailors and Marines when disaster struck. As it completed half of its journey, a sudden explosion ripped through the ship. A Japanese submarine launched 2 torpedoes at the Indianapolis, striking the starboard side beneath her fuel tanks and causing a catastrophic blast that split the ship in 2. The Indianapolis sank in just 12 minutes, claiming the lives of 300 crew members who were trapped inside. Those who survived were thrust into the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, with limited lifeboats and life jackets available. The initial survivors were engulfed in oil from the ship's ruptured tanks, suffering from severe sunburn during the day and freezing temperatures at night. To compound their misery, hungry oceanic whitetip and tiger sharks began to feast on the fallen soldiers. Over time, these predators grew bolder, even pulling down remaining survivors. Despite sending multiple distress signals before the ship went down, no help arrived. Tragically, the 3 stations that received these messages failed to respond. One commander was intoxicated, another refused to be disturbed during a card game, and the third dismissed the messages as a ruse. It wasn't until 4 days after the sinking that a U.S. naval aircraft spotted the exhausted men. By the time rescue teams arrived, only 316 of the original crew members remained alive. The combination of a torpedoed vessel, the relentless sun, hypothermia, and voracious sharks make the USS Indianapolis one of the most harrowing shipwreck stories ever told. Number 10. SS Central America. In the mid-19th century, the United States was swept up in a gold rush frenzy. The most notable event was the Californian Gold Rush, which drew countless hopeful miners to the West Coast in search of fortune. When it came to transporting the precious metal, the steamship SS Central America was the vessel of choice. On September 3, 1857, this substantial ship, laden with over 9 tons of gold, set sail from the port of Colón, Panama, destined for New York City. This marked her 44th round trip in just 4 years. However, 6 days later, while navigating the waters off the Carolinas, disaster struck as the steamship was caught in a hurricane. The winds reached a staggering 105 miles per hour, tearing the sails apart and causing the ship to begin taking on water. By September 11th, the situation worsened as the ship's boiler failed, leaving the Central America powerless and at the mercy of the storm. In a desperate act of distress, Captain William Herndon raised the U.S. flag upside down, but no ships responded to the call for help. Fortunately, 2 vessels were eventually sighted, and 153 passengers managed to escape in lifeboats. Remarkably, many men chose to remain aboard the Central America, making heroic efforts to keep the ship afloat and protect her valuable cargo until help arrived. Tragically, rescue never came. At approximately 8 p.m. on September 12th, the SS Central America sank, taking a heart-wrenching 425 lives with her. The loss of life was devastating, but it wasn't just the tragedy that resonated. The estimated value of the gold aboard equated to around $300 million today, creating a financial panic among investors.
I know that I'm not the only one that was thinking the entire time, like, what happened with the gold? Not trying to be insensitive to the people that were on board and trying to be heroic and trying to keep it afloat, but that gold, you know they done got that by now, right? That's the only reason we're hearing about it now. If that gold hadn't been found, we'd have never known about this shit, bro. You can believe that.
And ultimately leading to the Panic of 1857, marking it as the first global economic crisis. Indeed, the shipwreck of the SS Central America had a profound and seismic impact on history. Number 9. Sultana. Just 8 years after the sinking of the SS Central America, the United States faced another maritime tragedy. Following the conclusion of the American Civil War in April 1865, former Union prisoners of war were ecstatic to finally return home. Men who had been held captive in Vicksburg, Mississippi, eagerly boarded the Sultana, a 260-foot wooden steamship designed to carry a maximum of 375 passengers. However, the U.S. government was paying $2.75, equivalent to about $51 today, for each soldier's transport. This incentivized the ship's captain, J. Cass Mason, to cram approximately 2,400 people aboard, far exceeding the vessel's capacity by more than 6 times. The overcrowding was not the Sultana's only peril. While docked at Vicksburg, Mason was aware that the steamship had a malfunctioning boiler. Yet instead of making the necessary extensive repairs, he chose to patch the leaky boiler, wanting to fulfill the lucrative government contract. The combination of a patched boiler and severe overcrowding proved disastrous. In the early hours of April 27th, just 3 days after leaving Vicksburg, the Sultana exploded violently. Although some believed the ship had been sabotaged by Confederate sympathizers, it was indeed the faulty boiler that had finally failed. The blast ripped apart the ship, with many passengers dying instantly, while others were trapped when the overloaded decks collapsed. Survivors awoke to find themselves thrown into the air, crashing down into the cold waters of the Mississippi River. Those fortunate enough to survive clung to pieces of wreckage, drifting until they reached shore or were rescued. Unfortunately, only around 700 of the 2,300 individuals aboard made it to safety. That grim statistic means that roughly 30% of those on the Sultana survived. Captain Mason, however, was not among them, as he was also lost in the tragedy. Number 8. Costa Concordia. Now let's turn to the story of Francesco Schettino, the captain of the Costa Concordia, a colossal cruise ship measuring 952 feet. In January 2012, Schettino was navigating the vessel through the Mediterranean Sea, carrying 4,229 excited passengers. However, that excitement quickly turned to fear. Schettino decided to sail the ship dangerously close to shore to perform a salute for people on land, doing so at night in a poorly lit area while traveling at 15.5 knots. To make matters worse, it was later revealed that he likely undertook this risky maneuver to impress a woman who was on deck with him at the time. As fate would have it, the ship struck an underwater rock near the island, ripping a 174-foot gash in its port side below the waterline. Water began to flood in, causing the Costa Concordia to list to starboard. Unlike other large cruise ships, this one was sinking due to sheer incompetence. Instead of taking immediate action, Schettino attempted to downplay the incident and delayed alerting the Italian search and rescue teams about the collision.
Why do they do that? Oh my God, why do they downplay it? Fam, why? Who? Oh my gosh, I should already expect that from him. He ain't in his right mind anyway. This fool trying to impress a woman. He's trying to impress a woman. I'm on this boat chilling, having a drink in a casino, and this fool up here trying to impress a woman in shallow water. Like, oh my gosh, bro, I just got off a cruise, and stuff like that be going through my mind. It do, man. It do. Like, you have to sometimes force yourself to go to sleep, especially if it's a bit rocky at night when you're going to sleep. And you're just like, well, at this point, it is what it is. That's what I have to tell myself. It is what it is. But this fool here, man, and he was downplaying it. Like, bro, he should be still in jail to this day.
It took over an hour after the impact for the crew to start evacuating the passengers. By then, the ship had already begun to list significantly, and inexplicably, Schettino was not present during the evacuation. He was spotted in a lifeboat before most of the passengers had even disembarked.
You out your mind. He better not have been on. He'd have been on land when I got there, bro. Oh my God, I'm going to jail with him. I'm going to jail with him, fam. Are you kidding me? He didn't even stick around. The captain's supposed to go down with the ship, not this fool. Not this fool.
Later claimed he had fallen into the lifeboat due to the ship's tilt, which was met with skepticism. After 6 arduous hours, the evacuation of the Costa Concordia was finally completed, but tragically, not everyone had made it back to shore. A total of 32 lives were lost during this calamity, and the event led to a deserved 16-year prison sentence for Schettino. The cruise line itself paid out $91 million in compensation to passengers and crew members. To put that into perspective, that's nearly 5 times what the White Star Line paid for the Titanic disaster. The Costa Concordia was indeed a costly shipwreck in every sense of the word. Number 7. SS Princess Alice.
And we put our lives in these fools' hands, man. And I don't know why we be thinking like, they got us. They wouldn't do something like that, but they human just like us. And apparently a short skirt, I don't know if she was wearing a short skirt, but in my story, she got on a short skirt, and a short skirt made him wreck a boat. Wow.
While London's River Thames is well known for iconic sites like Big Ben and Tower Bridge, it harbors a darker secret that many are unaware of. In September 1876, passengers aboard the Princess Alice paddle steamer were returning along the Thames after a delightful day at Sheerness on the Kent coast. Everything was going smoothly until the SS Bywell Castle, a cargo ship, was spotted heading downstream. Initially, there was no alarm, but as the two vessels drew closer, panic began to spread. The 890-ton Bywell Castle was far larger than the Princess Alice, and neither vessel had the maneuverability needed to avert a collision in time. Despite Captain William Grinstead's attempts to turn the ship, Bywell Castle collided with the Princess Alice, tearing the vessel in half and causing it to sink rapidly. Although the river was only 1/3 of a mile wide, many passengers couldn't swim, and the heavy dresses worn by women further hindered their ability to stay afloat. The tragedy was compounded by the fact that the collision occurred right next to London's sewage pumping stations. Just an hour before the accident, 90 million gallons of raw sewage were pumped into that section of the Thames. Survivors plunged into a river tainted with filth and debris, making their struggle for survival even more horrific. Of the approximately 700 people on board, only 130 survived the calamity. The number of survivors further dwindled in the following days, as some who had initially escaped succumbed to illness from ingesting the contaminated water. In terms of loss and suffering, the sinking of the Princess Alice remains one of the most tragic maritime disasters in history. Number 6. La Joola. In September 2002, the ferry La Joola, a modest 260-foot vessel, departed from the port of Ziguinchor in southern Senegal, headed for the capital city, Dakar. Typically, La Joola made the 300-mile journey twice weekly, but by that time, it had been out of service for nearly a year due to repairs on its port engine. Once the ship returned to service at the end of 2002, it was limited to just one weekly trip to allow the new engine to be properly broken in. However, this single voyage generated an overwhelming demand for tickets. On September 26th, when La Joola set sail once more, it was carrying a staggering 1,863 passengers, far exceeding its intended capacity of just 580. As the ship left the port, reports indicated it was visibly listing due to overcrowding. Initially, the atmosphere on board was lively and cheerful, but everything changed at 11 p.m. when the ferry encountered a severe storm halfway through its journey. Normally, the ship would withstand rough weather, but with so many passengers sleeping on the upper deck, it became dangerously top-heavy. Just 5 minutes after entering the storm, La Joola rolled over, with the bottom of the vessel surfacing above the water. While many managed to survive the initial capsizing, they found themselves trapped in tiny air pockets within the overturned ship. Tragically, help was not on the way. The crew was caught off guard by the rapid tilt of the ferry, failing to send out a distress signal in time. It wasn't until one of the survivors launched flares into the sky that nearby fishing boats came to assist. While these boats managed to rescue some individuals from the water, official rescue teams didn't arrive until the following morning. Even then, they were unable to save those still trapped beneath the upturned ferry. 16 hours after the disaster, La Joola sank completely, resulting in the tragic loss of 1,799 lives, leaving only 64 survivors to recount the heartbreaking tale of Africa's deadliest maritime disaster. Now it's time for the sweet topic. No one talks about this shipwreck, which is worse than the Titanic. Sadly, we have no footage of the ship under the water, where it was found. But in looking at the photographs the marine biologist took of the wreckage site, an artist has created this image determining what it would have looked like when it was sinking. Back in the 90s, the engines of this colossal cruise ship ruptured. Tipping over, it was totally doomed. Now, thankfully, it was close enough to shore that the escape and rescue mission was easy, and all crew and passengers got to safety. But the ship itself fell to the bottom of the water, lost for good. Maybe it's because no human lives were lost, meaning there's no captivating and emotional human element. But still, the ship was lost, so it's weird we don't talk about it. As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below using the hashtag #SweetTopic. Number 5. SS Eastland. Following the Titanic tragedy, new regulations were implemented to enhance safety measures on passenger vessels. Among these laws was the Federal Seamen's Act, passed in 1915, which mandated that ships carry a sufficient number of lifeboats. One vessel impacted by these regulations was the SS Eastland, a 265-foot passenger ship famously known as the Speed Queen of the Great Lakes. While the ship was renowned for its speed and aesthetics, it was also notorious for being top-heavy and unstable. Ironically, the Federal Seamen's Act exacerbated the Eastland's stability issues. Originally designed for 6 lifeboats, the ship now housed 11, along with 37 life rafts and about 2,500 life jackets, mostly stored on the upper deck. Experts had cautioned that this additional weight could easily lead to capsizing. Their fears proved well-founded on July 24, 1915, when the Eastland was docked on the Chicago River, boarding employees from an electron tube company for a company picnic. At 6:41 a.m., while still tied to the dock, the vessel began to list precariously to the starboard side. In a panic, the crew attempted to balance the ship by flooding the ballast tanks with water, but this only caused the Eastland to tilt further, eventually tipping over 25 degrees. Minutes later, the vessel rolled onto its side, allowing those on the upper decks to escape over the starboard railing, while others were thrown into the frigid waters below. Those trapped below deck faced dire circumstances, with heavy furniture crashing across the tilting floors and many unable to find a way out as water surged in. Out of approximately 2,500 passengers and crew members, 844 tragically lost their lives. Most of these individuals perished just a short distance from the riverbank, marking the Eastland disaster as one of the most tragic maritime accidents in history. It's astonishing to think that lifeboats, meant to save lives, played a role in this catastrophe.
I'm so glad I watched this video after I got on that cruise. Because you don't think about it. You think about things happening, don't get me wrong, but you don't think about the lifeboat being a reason as to it making it top heavy. You know what I mean? Or the addition, that plus the addition of the people being on top and being on one side or whatever, causing it to tip over. Like, you don't think about that. Because when you get on a boat, what's the first thing they do? Sail away party, everybody on the Lido deck, and it's crowded. Crowded. Like, and I never even thought about that, but you can definitely for sure believe the next time I'm on one, I'm like, hey, some of y'all go to y'all rooms, some of y'all, why don't y'all go get something to eat, go get a drink somewhere else. Everybody ain't got to be on the Lido deck, man.
Number 4. White Ship. Long before the calamity of the SS Eastland, another maritime tragedy unfolded involving the White Ship, a vessel reminiscent of a Viking longship. In the year 1120, this ship was set to sail across the English Channel, transporting a group of English nobles from France back to England. Captain Thomas Fitzstephen had offered his ship to King Henry I, who declined the offer but allowed his entourage, including his heir, William Adelin, to board. As they traversed the turbulent waters of the Channel, excitement filled the air as passengers urged Fitzstephen to speed past the king's ship. The White Ship was renowned for its swiftness, instilling great confidence in the crew. However, this overconfidence would soon lead to disaster. While racing across the darkened channel, the White Ship's portside struck an uncharted rock near Barfleur in Normandy, causing the vessel to capsize. Tragically, nearly all of the 300 passengers drowned as the ship went down, including William Adelin, the heir to the English throne. This loss was not only a personal tragedy for King Henry I, but also sparked chaos across the kingdom. With no rightful heir to succeed him, Henry's death 15 years later ignited a civil war among claimants fighting for the throne. Historical records reveal that alongside those who died in battle, thousands succumbed to starvation as the unrest spread. It's heartbreaking to consider how a moment of reckless enthusiasm led to such far-reaching consequences. If only the nobles had exercised more caution instead of treating the voyage like a reckless race. The chaos that ensued following the loss of the White Ship illustrates the fragility of power and the catastrophic impact of a single event on an entire kingdom. Number 3. Doña Paz. In December 1987, excitement filled the air as passengers boarded the MV Doña Paz in the Philippines, eager to return home for the holiday season. This 305-foot ferry was designed to accommodate 1,518 passengers, but due to corrupt officials, a staggering 4,400 people were crammed onto the dangerously overcrowded vessel. At 6:30 a.m. on December 20th, the Doña Paz departed from Leyte, aiming to reach Manila by 4 a.m. the following day. Despite the cramped conditions, the journey started off smoothly, and as night descended, many passengers drifted off to sleep. Their peaceful rest was abruptly interrupted, however. Around 10:30 p.m., the Doña Paz collided with the MT Vector, a 170-foot oil tanker. Both ships had clear visibility and calm seas, yet neither crew seemed aware of the other's presence. Investigations later revealed that the captain of Doña Paz had been watching a film while the crew enjoyed drinks in their quarters. To complicate matters, neither vessel was equipped with a working radio. This negligence had catastrophic consequences, especially since the MT Vector was laden with over 1,000 tons of gasoline. Upon impact, the tanker's cargo ignited, leading to a massive explosion that quickly engulfed the Doña Paz in flames. While many perished in the initial blast, those who survived faced an equally dire situation. The fire ignited the oil-slicked waters surrounding the ship, and the life jackets were unfortunately locked away, forcing any remaining survivors to jump into the fiery water without any means of flotation. About an hour later, a nearby vessel spotted the blazing ships and managed to rescue just 26 survivors. This disaster resulted in approximately 2,800 fatalities, making it the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history. Number 2.
And Queen be wondering why I don't trust these captains, bro. I got one over here on one hand trying to impress a short skirt. You know what I mean? And y'all be seeing on these ships, right? When you're on these ships that all these women run up to when they see the captain, want to stop and talk to him and stuff like that. He be eating it up, don't he? Don't trust that captain if you see that. Number 2, then you got this other one over here trying to watch Netflix. He's supposed to be steering the ship and he over here sitting down watching Netflix, bro. You can't make this up.
MV Wilhelm Gustloff. As World War II neared its end and Soviet forces advanced westward, Germany initiated Operation Hannibal, a naval evacuation plan aimed at transporting troops and civilians back to Germany. By January 1945, thousands of German refugees flocked to the port of what is now Gdynia, Poland, eager to board the Wilhelm Gustloff, a massive 684-foot military transport ship. On January 30th, the ship embarked for Kiel, Germany, but it was severely overcrowded. Though designed to carry 1,465 passengers, estimates suggest that nearly 10,000 individuals were crammed aboard that fateful day, putting the ship's capacity at over 6.5 times its limit. Unbeknownst to the passengers, a Soviet submarine, the S-13, was lying in wait beneath the surface. At 9 p.m., the submarine launched 3 torpedoes, hitting the Wilhelm Gustloff in the stern, bow, and midsection. Panic ensued as passengers fled below deck to escape the rising water, but many lifeboats were frozen in place, rendering them useless. To make matters worse, the ship began to list heavily to one side, further obstructing access to the remaining lifeboats. In total, only 9 lifeboats could be launched before the ship sank, forcing the majority of survivors to leap into the frigid Baltic Sea. Tragically, the water temperature was below 39 degrees Fahrenheit, which caused many to lose consciousness within minutes. While some fortunate individuals found their way onto lifeboats and were rescued by nearby vessels, the numbers were painfully low. By the time search efforts were called off, only about 1,200 survivors had been accounted for. The Wilhelm Gustloff's sinking resulted in nearly 9,000 casualties, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. Number 1. SS Kiangya. In late 1948, China was embroiled in a brutal civil war as communist forces steadily gained control across the nation. Thousands of people sought refuge from the advancing communists in the nationalist stronghold of Shanghai, hoping for a way out. Their means of escape was the SS Kiangya. On December 4, 1948, this steamer departed with a registered capacity for 2,150 passengers, but the number on board was nearly double that figure. Many desperate individuals had squeezed into the overcrowded vessel before it departed the dock. Initially, conditions aboard the Kiangya seemed manageable despite the crowding. However, calamity struck just 50 miles south of Shanghai, at the entrance of the Huangpu River. The ship was violently rocked by a significant explosion near the stern, believed to be the result of a leftover Japanese naval mine from World War II. Due to the shallow waters of the river, the ship did not fully submerge. Instead, the hull settled upright on the riverbed, leaving parts of the upper deck still above the surface. Sadly, those who survived the explosion quickly faced a dire fate as water poured into the lower decks. The radio room was among the flooded sections, rendering it useless and preventing any distress signals from being sent. Hours later, distress flares shot into the sky were finally noticed. Multiple small boats responded to the emergency, but by then, the number of survivors was alarmingly low. Many lost their lives due to the explosion, the ship sinking or succumbing to hypothermia in the frigid waters. The tragic Kiangya disaster is estimated to have claimed close to 3,920 lives, which is nearly 3 times the casualties from the Titanic sinking, making it the deadliest maritime disaster in China's history. Do you think these shipwrecks should be as well known as the Titanic?